Come on, you know it. Scam of the week. We'll give you a little clue. It towers above all other scams this week. Just a little clue. It comes from a place where the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine. Well, the wind sometimes may blow, and that ain't pretty, but the sun definitely does not shine. It's the guy with no policy, suddenly, this week, having the biggest policy since Arthur Phillip turned up at Botany Bay. Well, they're calling it a policy. Policies tend to include inconvenient things like detail about things like costs, nuclear reactor types, where we're going to get the billions of litres of water from on the world's driest continent. This is, of course, the nuclear policy. Oh, and where we're going to put that annoying waste, billions in costs there as well, but we have nothing. So it's really more of a plan than a policy. Or as Baldrick would say, I have a cunning plan. It was cunning, all right. But it was already looking dead in the water by Friday, as people suddenly started talking to real people about it and not just listening to the Murdoch press. But this whole scam tells us something about the world. Let's see. To the origins, yes, it is tempting to think that it was internally generated by Peter Dutton, the opposition leader himself. It looks like that. Just having a go. But Peter, it appears, is just a vessel being used to win an election for an American billionaire. A quid pro quo will get you elected by making you look incredible, and you return the favour with some commercial fealty to our corporation. The real origins are likely to be with political advisors of the coalition, donors such as Gina Reinhardt, who switched horses from nuclear, didn't like it before, now does, like all the rest of them. Other News Corp types and the party strategists who have workshopped the proposition that it doesn't matter whether something is true or not. It doesn't matter whether it will ever happen, whether we even have one iota of intention of making it ever happen, which we don't believe is the case. How do we get this bloke into office? That is the scam. How many of them believe it? Not many. Perhaps none of them. You see, if it had any substance, well, we've seen Ziggy Switkowski suddenly turn up on the scene as an expert, but let's just put that aside for a second. If the nuclear plan had any substance, we would have heard it by now. But we haven't heard from energy experts, from energy market experts, and we haven't heard from scientists. Nobody of credible note. The Coalition's marketing department, Sky News Australia, even had Chris Kenny interviewing a schoolchild who, he's having a crack. Good on the schoolchild. This is about the media. And their expert, who is still at school, said, and this is fair dinkum, we need to have a mature debate in this country. Of course, good old Chris Kenny, his brow was furrowed as he took this seriously, because they have to do that. That is their job. To be chipmunks in the News Corp empire. Even the boss of AGL, Australia's biggest polluter, just came out. This is the guy that controls the Loy Yang power station in Victoria, and said, this just isn't viable. It's not viable on either cost or on time frame to energy transition. But you have to hand it to our boy Peter Dutton, and his cunning plan. Here was a guy with no policy, suddenly with the biggest policy for generations. Now, why is that? What has happened here? Not a whiff of an expert or a corporation or an investor backing it. Apparently the government's got to pay for it all. They're punting that the numbskull mainstream media will back it and sway the opinion of millions of Australians. It is a media play. It is a scam, a con. The daring do of it all is that the Coalition is punting that the media that they control can treat Australians as complete fools and sway their opinion. Such is the state of our media. It is busted. But it worked, at least on a couple of days' view. The scam has worked already. Over at the Daily Mail, we've got Peter Van Onselen, who managed to bash Labour for not taking this brain explosion seriously. And the Daily Telly and the Murdoch tab splashed with nuclear strike and going nuclear, Dutton's power play. The 9 papers were almost as disgraceful, framing the power play from Dutton as crazy brave. Framing Peter Dutton as some kind of Mel Gibson in Braveheart. The ABC followed all this nonsense until by Friday morning on breakfast radio, when they'd actually begun talking to people, real people, and probably people who knew what they were talking about too. They had been following the Murdoch cue, but they began to realise that it was just not that popular. Maybe they had it wrong. Maybe they had been scammed. I mean, there was a heap of other contenders for Scam of the Week this week, but nothing so grand, so grandiose. Under coverage of this nuclear palaver, the absurdity of a non-planned plan, out of the blue, with zero credibility, ATO whistleblower Richard Boyle lost his appeal in a court in South Australia, which means he may be following David McBride to jail for doing the right thing. The whole affair has rendered Australia's whistleblower laws a complete joke. They don't work. They've never protected one whistleblower. The Environment Minister, meanwhile, TANYA Approving, was quietly approving not only a gas fracking project for some Americans, some Texan oil billionaires in the Northern Territory, but also, gotta love her work, Gina Rinehart's coal seam gas pipeline as well. Undercover of Peter's nuclear power play. And the gas lobby, as usual, was out there all week, wailing to the AFR and the Australian and anybody else that would listen that there were gas shortages. How cold is it at the moment? It's winter. This, when Australia exports 80 to 90% of its gas, the biggest LNG exporter in the world, and they're crying about shortages. That, too, is a huge scam, but we've done it many times before. And of course, the fix is easy, a gas reservation policy, so that Australians can get at a good price the gas which they actually own anyway. I mean, it's not as if they pay any royalties or much tax on it, these foreign multinational companies. What a rort. Yet all of these were dwarfed by Peter's cunning plan, a massive distraction, the plan to make him look decisive, leadership material, bold against a vacillating elbow, in a cost of living crisis. It's all about Peter. It's not about nuclear. None of his peers, Angus, Susan, Jane, none of them know anything about nuclear. They've got no experts. They're all just towing the line, making Peter look decisive, making him look like leadership material. That is the scam. They have to plead fealty to their fearless leader. It's a high-risk play, of course. Could all come tumbling down very quickly, but they know that they have News Corp and the 9 people and the 7 people pushing it all the way with the shock jocks too on 3AW and 2GB, while ABC and 9, they'll both sides it all the way, talking about how bold Peter has been, about the politics of it, not the policy. They won't use words like costings. Well, if they do use words like costings, the eyes will glaze over, so they don't count. It's words like Peter Dutton, Braveheart. To quote 2GB, Peter Dutton has shown himself to be a leader. And they added, you would have to have your head read to think otherwise. The words which nuclear evokes. Nuclear itself. Very strong word. Atomic energy, reactor. Robust stuff compared with stuff like wind and solar and batteries. Where's the competition there? Semantics have been won, hands down by Peter, and you can bet all the pundits this weekend will be saying that he won the week with his when the wind don't shine and the sun don't blow, even trotting that out this week as they all do. As if nobody had ever invented battery storage, whose capacity, of course, leaps every year as technology advances. We can do it without nuclear. We can do it without coal, and we can do it without gas eventually. Renewables, batteries, we can do it. That's what AEMO, that's what the experts say, and the scientists, CSIRO, we don't need nuclear. It is a scam. But of course, it's not about that. It's just about the words, not about the facts. And what about the lies? No other country in the world, said Peter, can keep its lights on with renewables? Well, no other country, apart from Norway, Ethiopia, Iceland, Paraguay, Costa Rica, Nepal, Albania, Bhutan, Lesotho, Congo, Uganda, Eswatini, Central African Republic, Andorra, Belize, Tajikistan, Zambia, Namibia, Uruguay. Just a few. Everybody is heading that way. Renewables are happening. They are becoming an ever-increasing part of the grid in almost every nation. So this is really a big scam about media and politicians distracting the population deliberately with lies. And they know it will never happen, except the most gullible of them. It's too costly. They know, or they should know, the advice of AEMO and the CSIRO and any energy expert that matters. They know it can be done, the transition with renewables. The independent voices make that true. And what would he have to do anyway? Let's say he won the election. He'd have to win the election first, that's next year. Then he'd have to push legislation through Parliament. He'd need Labor to roll over in the Senate, so Labor would have to vote on the same ticket. Well, it's quite possible. They'd have to pay multinational corporations money to redevelop their coal-fired power stations. Already, at least one of them has said no. They'd have to get community approval. Now, Matt Canavan apparently says that he does want a nuclear power plant in his backyard. But how are they going to do that with the risk of contamination? Then they've got to develop nuclear regulation. This is before they even dig a hole in the ground. They've got to develop the safety processes. It's 2024, and an optimistic view would be that a reactor gets up in 20 years' time if you look at the global time to completion statistics, even though these guys are saying they're going to get it done in 10 to 12 years. This from the crew that had 9 years in government and could not even build commuter car parks, whose snowy Hydro 2 blew out from 2 billion to 12 billion. They're still trying to tunnel through a mountain. 20 years makes it 2045. We can get it done with renewables by at least then. And they're saying 2 reactors in 10 to 12 years. Of course, the media misreported this as 7 reactors, all 7, Why not go for the jugular on the detail? Just chuck it out there, whatever you feel like saying. Imagine if it was on the same cost trajectory blowout and time as Snowy and Inland Rail. 2 billion to 12 billion Inland Rail, just 6 times. We're talking $500 billion. It'd make AUKUS look like a good deal. But none of this, despite the fact that they have got a private investor in sight. Not even a suggestion of one. The great capitalist espousers such as Judy Sloan over at The Australian, the great voice of capitalism, saying that this one should be funded all with public money. Well, why didn't they say that to save us electricity bills for the last 2 decades when they privatised the electricity grid? They didn't say it because it wasn't Liberal Party policy. And there's David Littleproud calling for caps on renewable energy investment. At least there is private capital crowding in by the bucket load for renewable energy projects. So Littleproud wants to get rid of that, or wants to stop that and spend it on something which is going to take 20 years to build at least. It's never going to happen, and they don't think it's going to happen. I mean, we're always at Labor for being hopeless on expediting and approving fossil fuel projects, just more this week. But at least they are doing it on the renewable energy rollout front. They're doing what they actually said they would do. Very unusual, unlike the knack and transparency in government and all that stuff. So when they take it with a grain of salt, when they bag it, when they use a sense of humour and satire, that's the way to go, because it is a ridiculous idea, nuclear, which even its proponents don't really believe. So here it is, all the capitalists, the crony capitalists, saying do it with public money. Privatise the profits, socialise the losses, let the punters pay for it all. And at the end of the day, it will just mean far higher electricity bills, because everybody knows and everybody says, those who know what they're talking about, that nuclear energy is at least twice the cost, maybe 4 times the cost of solar and wind. This is what the credible experts say. And battery storage is improving, as we noticed, by the month. But with an utterly incompetent and venal media, these things are possible, perhaps, making Peter the decisive, strong leader, along with fear-mongering about asylum seekers and Labor's economic management and all this stuff. This is the strategy to take us to the next election. Peter Dutton, the bold and decisive leader, image again, has triumphed over substance. That's why it's so important to have an independent media. So we thank you for your support. Please like, share, and comment in the space below.